You'll be more effective as you go into research if you know what you're researching for, why you're researching, and why it matters. So take time with all those steps. And after you've done that, you're ready to get to the big question everybody usually has: where do we find funding? How do we find funding? What are some ways to look for funding? We're going to look at funding at a couple of different levels and a couple of different types. As I mentioned, a lot of times when people think of grants, they immediately only think federal grants, which is fine. It's big. Everybody knows about it. We're all involved somehow or affected by federal government. But some things to think of. There are 26 federal agencies that administer more than 1,000 grant programs totaling roughly $400 billion annually. And that sounds great, and it sounds like, great, I should just be able to apply for any grant and get money. But we all know the reality. A lot of people are fighting for that money. So think of that when you're looking at the federal government level. You may not be ready to start at that level. You may be ready to start at that level. If nothing else, looking at the federal government level will give you a lot of good information on the grant process. And there's a lot of organizations to consider: Department of Agriculture, Department of Commerce, Department of Defense, Department of Education, Department of Housing and Urban Development, or as HUD as a lot of people know it. So there's a lot of agencies that might apply to your research, your cause, or your organization. So one of the sites I often recommend to always start out with, even if you don't think you're ready to go research at the federal level, is grants.gov. It's a great website. It's got a lot of information on federal agencies, types of grants. You can sign up and receive notification on future grants. So you're building that knowledge base, if not for right now, then for the future. And I guarantee you'll come away with something that will help your overall grant process. Also, look at the catalog of federal domestic assistance. This gives a lot of government grants as well. You can search by topic area, keyword, other methods. So there's a lot of ways that you'll be able to utilize this as a resource. One of the newer ones is recovery.gov, which is a result of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009. This will show a lot of activity in certain areas. There tends to be a lot of information related to transportation, construction, larger projects. But you never know what you'll find out. Possibly somebody looking for someone to team with, possibly a long-term growth area that you hadn't thought of. Look at these government agencies well. Besides the three main ones, each of those government agencies, and I only listed a few because there is 26, has their own website. So decide what government agencies probably best apply to your organization and look at that specific website. They might have information on upcoming events they have that could help you in your research, or at least help you to get a better understanding of what the priorities are of that organization. Just as you need to know your priorities, you need to know theirs to make sure they're in line. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. But you need to see what fits with you, and a lot of ways, one of the easiest ways to do that is looking at the specific agency websites for the federal government if it's going to apply to your organization. And that'll help you get in a sense of that. We also need to look at local government. Local governments are a great resource for grant funding. I've listed a few: Montgomery County Council, Frederick City Government Grants for Human Services. There's also some others: Ohio Arts Council, or the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control. I would say what you want to do is first look at your county website. A lot of times they'll list different councils and organizations in your respective states. Or go by topic, say Montgomery County Biotech Grants, or Howard County Biotech Grants, Jefferson County Biotech Grants. You also might want to look at a site called fundsnetservices.com. This offers grants organized by category and subject area as well, so you could look for regional or government funders as well. So that could be another resource for local government. Another way to look at grants is from community and corporation grants. Right in your neighborhood, right where you work or where you live or where you volunteer or where you participate in activities, there are often a lot of charities and organizations that have grants. They tend to go by specific geographic area if it's a community grant. For example, there's the New York Community Trust, the Community Foundation for Northern Virginia, Chicago Community Trust. There's a Tulsa Community Trust. So look in your community, and there might be a foundation organization that specifically offers grants. But also think corporations. What are the large businesses in your area? Companies give back to communities. When we have strong communities, we have strong businesses, and larger corporations get this, and so they're willing to support community organizations and research. Corporate foundations total often over $13 billion in funding. That's a lot of foundations that are probably not thought of because people immediately just think federal. Some ones you might want to consider: Lockheed Mountain Foundation, Bank of America Charitable Foundation, SAIC Foundation for Enterprise Development, Ford Motor Company Foundation. Think about where you volunteer, where your friends volunteer, what companies they work for. A lot of these organizations also have newsletters. Sign up for their newsletters. It'll tell you about upcoming grants or programs you can be involved in. Think about professional organizations you belong to. One great resource at all levels, I think, is the Foundation Center. They have physical locations, but they also have amazing online resources. Some are free, some are paid. They offer classes, and a lot of their area is specifically focused on foundations at the corporate level. So it's a great resource to learn from, and also when you're looking for more information. Another area people don't often think about is independent or family foundations. More and more people are setting up family or personal foundations with their resources. A lot of these people have probably heard of, some you haven't. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. There's the Osherman Family Foundation, which is located in Frederick, Maryland, or the J. Paul Getty Trust. Oil, been around for years, but a lot of people don't think about it. There's also the Harry and Jeanette Weinberg Foundation in Baltimore, Maryland. But I guarantee in your local area there are definitely some strong foundations. They fund a lot of different things, from climate control-related research to individual projects to specific humanitarian causes or diseases, depending on why they started the foundation. So they're a good resource. One of the ways to find these, I say look at your local newspapers or your local business magazines. In Maryland, there's one called Montgomery County Magazine, so that could be a resource. But think of what you're reading. You know, you never know what magazine you get in your area that also features your foundation. Those people like information to get out there. So a lot of times those heads of foundations will do interviews or have ads so you know about them. Another place to think of is the Grantsmanship Center. It provides a lot of information and training and resources on foundations. One of the things I mentioned earlier is knowing the funder. You have a variety of research. I've shown you a lot of ways to ask for who you want to look for. So now there's some questions you should probably ask about the funder. You need to know them just as you know yourself. Most funders have some type of website these days. When you look at their website, ask yourself, where are they located? Do they support organizations in your area? If they only support organizations, say, in Arkansas, and you're in Texas, why are you looking at them? Think of who they're helping. A lot of times they'll have a mission statement that'll tell you where they are, what they're seeking to do, and their demographic. So those are things to look for to save yourself some time. Ask yourself, is what they're doing in line with what you're doing? Is it a priority for them? They often list, this year our priorities are such and such. If that's in line with you, it's a good one. If their priorities are totally different from what you're working on, don't waste the time. Are their deadlines realistic? If you're looking at it May 1st and the grant is due May 10th, you probably don't want to pursue it. But see if it comes around again. This way you can at least have it on your radar for the future. Is the amount available going to help you? If they're offering amounts that aren't even going to help you and you're just thinking, well, it's a chance to get at least some money, then don't even look at it. You know, don't just throw stuff against the wall, so to speak, thinking if I should do enough grants, I'll get money. You don't want to fall into that trap. Are you comfortable with that organization's missions? Just because it's a foundation or a community organization or a council that has a grant, it may not be in line with your vision and your goals. Then it's okay to not want to pursue something because you think there could be an ethical conflict between you and your own values with your organization. It's okay to decide not to pursue something. Just because you find information on it doesn't mean you need to go after it. Also, they often will tell you what the requirements are if you win the funding. So this ties into that obligation and commitment. Make sure that you were able to meet those obligations if you were able to get that funding. Would you be able to honor the commitments as they require? See what type of reporting they require. Would you be able to do it? Would you have the certifications they require? How does this going to impact you or hinder you rather than help you? You also want to think of questions that you might not have asked yourself yet as you go in to look at the funder. Is your accounting system enough? If they have specific requirements on your type of software or how you provide information on accounting, you need to decide, are you ready? What is their process for giving the funds? Is it spread out over 12 months? Do they give it immediately? Will that make it possible for you to actually utilize the funds? If the way they spend it or give it out or the recording procedures will hinder you actually accomplishing your goal, even though it might be the right amount, their process may not work with your process. Will it meet your organization's process? Will you be able, as an organization, to meet those processes or goals? And think, do you have alternatives? Do they offer more than one way to meet the requirements? And does one work but maybe the other doesn't? Or do you need maybe some clarification? It's okay to ask questions. They often have a question day for some of these for a certain person. Think of what type of reports you might need to generate. Do you have the ability to do that? Does your budget support getting some type of system that will allow you to document the different reports they want? Does your system allow you to show a breakdown of everything? And ask yourself, what type of disclosure are they going to want? Do you or are you willing to share all the information they're asking for? Do you feel it's intrusive? Do you feel that your program and policies are yours and yours alone and your business and you don't need to share it with them at the level they're asking for? If you don't, then don't pursue it. Don't pursue things that are going to waste time and resources. Think also, if something happens midstream and this organization ran out of funding, would you still be able to move forward? So maybe you only want to go after them for a smaller amount so it doesn't have such a great impact on your organization. These are questions that as you start to ask them and look at them, you might want to create some templates. Save yourself some time. Ask yourself these same questions every time you find a grant that you're interested in pursuing. Just like you took the time to look at your business, take time to truly look at the funders and not just go, ooh, it's $100,000, let's apply for it. Know your funders as well as you know your business before you pursue the grant. It'll save you time, grief, and headaches. Just as when you research, take time to know the research organizations. Decide what level you're starting at. Sometimes it's better to build some of that credibility at a lower, smaller level before you even look at something larger. It'll pay off. You'll still get funding. You'll still be able to grow, but you won't get a reputation as applying for things that you're not ready for, which could hinder you further down the road. So those are some opportunities and some ways and some information that I hope gets you started on the grant process moving forward. As I said, above all, remember, it's a commitment. It's an obligation. There is no such thing as free money, and it will take some resources. But the resources are out there, the funds are out there if you're willing to make the investment in your organization, your people, and your company.
Colette, this was fabulous. I want to thank you for putting together a very informative session on the grant process. And we have many questions that have come in. And to help us with these questions, I'd like to introduce Steve Lamberson. He is the Business Development Specialist with the Fort Dietrich Business Development Office. Steve, are you there?
Yes, hi Colette, or hi Gloria, and thank you very much. And I'd like to thank Colette for sharing her presentation on grants with us today. So thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
And I am receiving questions from some of our listeners as well. So if it's okay, I'd like to open this up with some of these questions.
Please do.
Okay. First question is from Sarah, and her question is it easier for a nonprofit business to get a grant in comparison to a for-profit business?
I don't necessarily think it's easier. I think that ties in, once again, to the reality of a situation. There are a lot of funding out there for research, for-profit organizations. I think where it becomes harder is when people think they can get individual grants. I think those are the hardest to get. You might have to do a little more research, but I think there are a fair number of funds out there as well for-profit as for nonprofit. People like to support things that they see are making a difference, and you can do that and still make a profit.
Okay, well, I have more questions. Gloria, would you like
to? Yes, Steve, if you could just go through them as they're coming in, that would be terrific.
Okay. All right, well, let's take another one then from Beth. And she asks, Colette, you mentioned that there's no such thing as free money. Can you explain a little more than the difference between grants and loans?
The difference between grants and loans are what are required as your obligation. With a loan, plain and simple, you borrow, say, $10,000. Your obligation is to pay back $10,000 and possibly some form of interest, or in most cases, some form of interest. The percentage could vary, and the payment terms back are going to vary as well. But the essential bottom line is at the end of the day, when you're done with that loan or you've paid off that loan, the person who loaned it expects to have the same amount of money back and some more, because their commitment to you was to loan you that money, and now their benefit is they got more money back. With a grant, you're given money as well, but instead of payback for funds, your payback is for success or results or what you've achieved. So it's still a form of payback, it's just in a different manner. Maybe it's you've now developed a new CERM, or you've now started a program that impacts 10,000 kids in your community or 15 adults in a smaller opportunity. But there is still some type of payback or obligation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you. I have more questions if we have time.
Sure.
We do.
Okay. Next question is from Liz, and she asks, when looking for help researching a grant, what should someone expect or ask about who they hire?
I would ask how they view grant writing. I know a lot of times the question people will ask is, how many grants have you successfully won and for how many dollars? And I understand why they ask that, but I don't think that's a good evaluator, because just like business proposals, you may write the best grant in the area, but it may not be in line with the organization. And it may have been written because the organization you're writing it for insisted on submitting it, even if you as the consultant didn't feel it was a good fit for them. So there's a lot of tangibles that can't be counted. I would instead ask, what types of grants have you written? What types of research have you done? See what areas or industries they have experience in. Get a sense of their values as an organization. Do you feel comfortable with them just as you would whoever funds your grant or a new employee you might hire? Ask what their overall business or writing experience is, so that you have a sense that this is a credible organization, that the way they do things, the way they operate is in line with what you were looking for. It's okay to ask who they work for, but I definitely don't think you're always going to get a true sense of an organization if you just ask about what their guarantee is in terms of number of dollars. One, they could just make up a number. And two, there could be a lot of factors that influence their success rate that won't tell you how good they really are.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, good. Another question comes from Brian, and he asks, why is it so important to evaluate your business?
I think it's important because you need to understand these are the types of questions that essentially are really part of writing a grant. When you go to write grants, a lot of the questions they'll ask is, what is your history? What is your past performance? What are your goals? How is your organization going now? What is your strengths and weaknesses? And by evaluating your business, you're going to have a lot of that information already, and you'll also have a better sense of what type of grant you want, what type of funding you want, what you need to pursue. Is it something that is just a one-and-done type grant, so to speak, or is it that step funding that's going to fund the program over several years because maybe you need larger funds up front, but then as you go through, you could operate on a regular basis with a decreasing level. So understanding your organization helps you understand what you want to research and what types of grants you want.
Okay, good. I have another one, another email that's come in from Carol, and she asks, how long should our wish list be?
I think initially your wish list could be as long as you want. Probably not more than a couple of pages because then it's going to be really hard to prioritize and whittle it down. But as I mentioned, even if you take something off your wish list now, it probably wouldn't hurt just to keep that full list for later because when it comes time, and this is a process you should go through more than once instead of if you're around 10 years, we did it 10 years ago and we're good. But when you go through it again, there might be things you originally took off that first wish list that you're now prepared to pursue. So it also could help you in the future when you go through this exercise again. But I wouldn't overdo it because then it's harder to make it smaller and prioritize.
Okay.
Steve,
right.
We have a few more minutes. We can take 2 or 3 more questions. And just as a reminder for everyone, send your questions in to the email at the bottom of the screen, which is ask@fdbdo.com. If we can answer them today, we will. If you're sending them in as listening to this as a recording, we will follow up with you. So no matter when you're sending your questions in, Steve will follow up directly with you. So Steve, do we have a few more that have come in?
Yeah, I have a couple more. Okay.
Great.
And one is from Ross, and he says that it seems to be a numbers game, so shouldn't we just apply for as many grants as we can?
No, unless you have unlimited resources and time. I know that, over the years, a lot of times let's just throw something as much against the wall and see what sticks. But it takes a lot of time and resources in most cases to write a grant. They're not one-pagers in most cases. There's several pages, and there's usually a lot of times several steps to the process. So you might make it through, say, one round, but then you've got to spend time answering follow-up questions or attending an interview or providing additional documentation. And you could only spend so much of your time and resources doing that and not get what you need to get done on a daily basis. So that's why I say you need to be very targeted in what you're doing. Otherwise, you probably will not get done just your day-to-day activities, and you could spend all of your days just working on grants and still not receive them because you're going after the wrong ones.
Good. All right. And I do have one more.
Great.
All right. And this is from Gerald. He asks, is there a level of grants that are easier to get?
I wouldn't necessarily say easier, but I would say there's probably less notoriety drawn to it when you win one. So in other words, if you're starting out getting a smaller local council grant or a local smaller foundation grant, there's probably less noticeability on how you're utilizing the funds or how the accountability is required, so it doesn't seem so overwhelming. There's probably not a national press release that you've received this grant for so-and-so amount of money. And because of the fact that there is less of that, the requirements might be a little more in line and easier to meet. The larger the funds are, there's going to be more accountability. There's going to be probably more requirements, more strict requirements in terms of financial accounting or how you get invoices to them to receive your funding, all of which can impact your ability as an organization. If you don't have the resources and time to do those types of things at that higher level, it's going to set you up for failure. And you don't want to fail. The organization that gives you the funds, and as I said, it's not free funds, but they're giving you funds, doesn't want you to fail either. It looks bad for everybody. So I would say you probably want to look at them in steps and in volume steps and levels. It's always good to have some past performance at a smaller local level before going after something at a larger foundation or federal government level.
And if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in here, Steve,
sure.
With a couple of questions of my own, frankly. And the reason I want to ask this first one is I hear it all the time. People are asking, can I get a grant to start my business? Colette, what do you say to that?
I would say there's a few out there, but it's hard, and it's going to depend on the type of business, to be honest. I think it's easier to get that type of funding for businesses that offer something that you can see tangibly. And what I mean by that is if you're doing research, you can tangibly see, though you don't see it yet, that the goal is to produce A or B or C. If your business is more of a service-related, where we provide a variety of services in various areas, it's hard for an organization to be able to set parameters or guidelines on what they want the outcome to be. Whereas if it's something like we build these boxes that are 12 by 14 that contain this, then as they're designing even the funds to request the applications, they can say the requirements are you must be able to produce, as a result of this funding, a box that measures 12 by 14 and contains A, B, or C. So I think those types of businesses, when starting, it's easier to get funding for than something that it's hard to put parameters or guidelines on, because on both sides it's hard to describe what the end result will be, what the benefit will be, what they will receive as a result of this funding.
So it sounds like someone might need some expert advice in this regard if they're wanting to use the grant process to fund their business.
Right, and they're also going to have to think of where am I personally if you're the head of the organization as well. Because a lot of what may make the decision is your own financial history, your own ability to keep track of funds, and your own background experience. So do you represent yourself and your organization in a way that adds confidence to that process?
That's perfect. Steve, I'd like to ask you to tell us more about the Fort Detrick Business Development Office and what's coming up.
Okay, yes. Well, when considering federal funds, such as grants, the Fort Detrick Business Development Office should be considered as a resource. The FDBDO is a free resource. It's a free service to companies interested in competing for business on federal contracts, specifically for those contracts that are in support of Fort Detrick. We provide education and training to companies of all levels of federal experience, such as this webinar on grants. Now, in addition to training, the FDBDO provides market intelligence on those solicitations and grants that are released in support of Fort Detrick. Now, timing is very important when addressing a solicitation, so we match the solicitations with those companies that are registered with the FDBDO. And you can register your company at our website. It's www.fdbdo.com. You can also call us. Our number is 301-620-7071. Thanks, Gloria.
Absolutely. And on your screen right now, on the page, we have Steve's contact information. We have Colette's contact information, Colette's phone number, her email address. Please don't hesitate to contact Colette if you have more questions about the grant process. She's
Gloria?
Yes?
Yes, I wanted to interject one time. I want to mention that Colette will also be presenting a second webinar on grants as a follow-up to this class in the near future. And meanwhile, our next scheduled webinar is titled Marketing to the Government. It's Gathering Market Intelligence. It's the pre-RFP. And that one is scheduled for Thursday, October 4 at 12:30. And you can register for that webinar today, and you can find a list of all webinar classes and upcoming events at our website. And that's www.fdbdo.com.
Oh, perfect. Absolutely perfect. And with Colette coming back to fill us in on the next steps of the grant process, I know that that's one that I am very much looking forward to, because it is an area that many businesses don't realize they can use to help provide services and products to the federal government as well as constituents in their own home state, no matter where they are in the United States. Colette, thank you for taking the time and giving us such valuable information.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Now, we want to also thank Steve and the entire team at the Fort Detrick Business Development Office. You can't ask for a more dedicated group that is there for the purpose of helping you build your federal contracting and grant business based in the Frederick, Maryland area, serving the Fort Detrick specifically base. Steve, do you get involved in any other federal targets as well, other than Fort Detrick?
Well, primarily, we target the federal solicitations that are released out of Fort Detrick. Now, Fort Detrick consists of many organizations that are referred to as mission partners, and there's 40, I've heard 50, so it's roughly between that number, all independent organizations and spending money. So the value of our office is we help you target solicitations, grants, the business opportunities that are being released from Fort Detrick.
And
from
they
Fort
could
Detrick
be
and those organizations.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize how many entities actually are based at Fort Detrick. So it's not just the Army. You may have NIH, you may have GSA, you may have 40 or 50 different federal entities that you can pursue business out of that area. So if you're listening today, what you want to do is make sure and take advantage of the opportunities that the Fort Detrick Business Development offers to you. Very good. Well, that wraps up our session for today. It's been a pleasure working with you both, and we'll look forward to the next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Gloria.
you.